McNair gives it to George, running right up the middle. Touchdown! Titan! There are no flags on the field! It's a miracle!
The safety, now you're one-on-one with it.
Shows why he's the man! In trouble. Sack!
Ladies and gentlemen, Titan Nation, how's everyone doing? Today, I have a special guest. He's the man, the wide receiver. We got Drew Bennett. How you doing today, sir?
Doing awesome, man. Thank you for having me on. This is fun.
No, again, thank you for your service. Again, a big fan favorite. Everyone loved. Talk about the 2000s. They talk about Drew Bennett. Fun to watch, and a lot of good memories. As me growing up, a lot of good plays, cool catches. Played with one of my favorite Titans teams, obviously with Steve McNair, Eddie George, and stuff like that. But like I said, thank you so much for coming on and spending some time. So,
my pleasure.
You're out. That's a nice background, man. I mean, my background is decent, but you have a nice little office right there. I see a Titans helmet up there on the left.
Oh yeah, I got some Titans memorabilia from back in the day. I mean, you got the jersey right there. You know,
okay, there it is. Nice,
yeah, so
very nice.
This
nice.
is the room my wife lets me put that stuff up. Right, the rest of the house, it's all right. And so this is my little domain of memorabilia from back in the day.
There you go. Do you just once in a while just think about like, man, like do you miss playing football at any chance, or is it like the game's done and you like watching it now? You're a fan of the sport.
Yeah, no, love watching it. No, there's definitely, still some times. And I think as every player that you probably had on, or every guy that I've talked to, the amount of time you watch a football game or you talk football or you see some sort of media related to football where you think, man, I really miss it. Like, wish I was still back doing it. I love that lifestyle. Those moments kind of get more and more spaced out. They never leave you. I still watch like playoff games. I remember getting ready for playoff games and how extra intense it was and how awesome the crowd was, especially when it was a night game or something like that. I mean, there's a lot to miss about that time of my life, but I don't have those moments as often as I did, say, 5-7 years ago. So it's getting better.
You're handling it better, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And let's talk about your college career. We'll talk about that. You played 3 sports. No, you played football, baseball, and what was the last one? Basketball. And apparently you were a hell of a player. You're pretty good, man. You had your choices. Not a lot of people have that gift and can do that. Was football always your end goal? Is that what you wanted that to be your career, or was it something else you kind of want to do and it just kind of fell into place?
Yeah, I always loved football. It was up there with, basketball and football were my 2 sports. Funny enough, I was probably maybe a little bit better basketball player in high school than football, but, kind of understood that, at my size and things like that, it was, there was more of an opportunity. Now it's funny how it worked out, but I was a quarterback. So they're saying, okay, if you're 6'5" and a quarterback, your upside's a little bit better than if you're 6'5" as a basketball player. So I kind of went that path. I had some options. Like I could have played basketball at Princeton, those types of smaller opportunities. And instead I walked on at UCLA, and I mean, it was kind of a wild ride, right? Because I started there as a QB behind Cade McNown, who was Mr. Everything, and earned a scholarship and, got the starting job, then got demoted, got moved to receiver. So, within one short college career, even though I didn't play a lot, I had a lot that went on.
Now, when you got demoted and you said, did you yourself want to play another position, or that was an assignment given to you? They wanted you to try out for wide receiver. How did that work out?
They gave me the option. It was kind of funny. So I started 3 games at quarterback my junior year, got demoted. They said, hey, so I backed up this other guy the rest of the season, very frustrated, kind of debating my love for football and whether I was going to play my senior year, whether I should transfer and go somewhere else. And in the offseason, they said, hey, you're a good athlete. Do you want to back up at quarterback your senior year, because it was my last year, or do you want to try to get on the field and play receiver, right? Like, so I decided, hey, I'd rather get on the field and play. I don't want to leave UCLA. I had such a good experience there. So I did the training camp. Now, the training camp's always funny. It's like 10 days in college. Looking back now, it's the most basic, easy training camp. But went through training camp at wide receiver. And then, of course, on the very first play of the very first game against Alabama, the starting quarterback broke his collarbone. So I would have started at quarterback my senior year had I stayed through camp as the backup quarterback. But, of course, so then they moved me back to backup quarterback. So this guy healed. So I really only played the last 4 or 5 games of the season at receiver and wasn't a starter. I think I had 5 catches or something like that in my whole college receiving career. So it was not quite the, NFL pedigree lead up to get drafted and be a big name coming out of college.
Now, do you think your career would have been totally different if, say, you would have chosen to be a quarterback and go into the draft?
It's hard to say, obviously if I couldn't win the starting job at UCLA, I was not in a position, I think, to be a big prospect for the NFL. So, I don't think that would have been the best path. I think it worked itself out. And, I was really fortunate because Cole Proctor, the scout that basically got me into Titans training camp.
Okay.
Funny enough. So, the way it works out is a lot of guys get invited to the combine. Clearly with 5 catches, you're not getting an invite to the combine. So we had the senior day where it's the same thing. You do the 40, you do the vertical, but instead you do it at your home school. And UCLA is a big enough university that a lot of the players, directors and some GMs and a lot of the scouts come out. So you have a pretty good audience of NFL guys. So Cole Proctor happened to be there. And years later, when I got to know Cole well through facility and being a Tennessee Titan, I was chatting with him. I'm like, oh, what was it about my workout that you liked? Why? Because the Titans were the only team that gave me a phone call for undrafted free agency. So that was my only opportunity in the NFL. And he's like, oh, actually, your workout sucked. I saw you playing basketball before the workout. You were down in Poly Pavilion shooting threes and dunking the basketball and jumping up and grabbing on the back, stuff like that. He's like, that's what made me realize, okay, this guy hasn't played any football at receiver, but he's a good athlete. Maybe we should give him a chance. So
that's funny. That's crazy how things work out. That's what he chose for you. Wow, that's amazing. That's cool. Yeah, I think I had one of my buddies, Preston Penn. One of the questions, I usually do this at the end, but again, we're talking about it. He wanted to know about ask him the splitting time at QB in college and then making the switch to wide receiver and what he did to help make the transition. Was the transition kind of hard doing that, or was it pretty simple?
No, it was, all the little intricacies of wide receiver, all the stuff that you don't really think about, right? You're like, hey, this guy run down the field and run a post route. Like, how tough can that be? But there's a lot more to it than that. And actually, I had, obviously, being a quarterback, I had a good understanding of what people were, if the quarterback wanted you to sit down against zone or, man-to-man wanted you to do this or stair step in a route, all of that I understood in concept. Implementing it took a little bit of time. But the one thing for me that was the biggest change was actually the amount of running. I know it sounds crazy, but, you can go do your off-season workouts. You're out there with your guys running for 30 minutes, doing sprints, and, you feel fine. But when, back in 2001, I mean, how long ago was that? But, you go to training camp for the first time for 6 weeks in Tennessee, and we're doing 2 practices a day, going out and running 40 routes, doing warm-ups, doing special teams, doing sprints, all of that stuff. You do that every day for a few days. Like, my legs, as good a shape as I was in, I was not conditioned to run that much every day for that much time. So I had tons of little soft tissue injuries and soreness that I'd never understood. And it took a long time. It took like a full year for my legs to get conditioned to run that much. I would say that actually the physical part of becoming a wide receiver was probably the toughest part over the mental part.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. And that's something that you kind of can relate almost to. I mean, the Tennessee Titans quarterback now, Ryan Tannehill playing wide receiver and then going to QB. So it's kind of like vice versa. It's almost the same or kind of not. What do you think about that?
That's more of a mental game for me. I mean, you have such a limited amount of responsibilities when you run a route. I can only imagine how much gets dumped on you when you're like, oh, no, now you're behind center. And you have to direct the, protection. You have to make sure this guy doesn't blitz, make sure your hot routes are this, find out what the coverage is after they roll, after the snap, But, he does have a good understanding of what, where they're trying to attack, what the guys are trying to do outside. So it definitely helps. But, yeah, that's definitely more mental than physical, I think, versus going from quarterback to receiver.
Now, do you think some people would argue and say, like, oh, he should at least know you'd think he would be a better QB. Not saying that Ryan Tannehill's not a good QB, but I guess ahead of the ball just because he was a wide receiver. Does that have anything to do with playing QB, like just kind of knowing their spots and how they, being a wide receiver?
I think so. I think timing wise, what guys are trying to accomplish and again, knowing what they're going to do versus man versus zone, those types of things, because those are different routes, different releases. You act differently at the top of the route. So I think it gives you a little step ahead. But like I said, all of the other stuff going on with protections and, changing the reads versus, what coverage they end up post snap versus pre snap, all that stuff is probably more difficult than any of that.
Yeah. People always would get into it with especially Tannehill. Tannehill's, especially this offseason, it's been a kind of topic of conversation nowadays.
Sure has.
Now, one of my buddies, cousin Brian, wants to know what his mentality coming in as an undrafted guy. How did that all plan out? And because everyone sees behind the cameras and stuff. Everyone, the number one draft pick. All the cameras are on, even that day. But what about being not picked at all? Like, how did you go through it and what happened?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a funny story. So I had this booty agent that, was like the only guy that would kind of represent a nobody like me coming out of college. And so he had told me, hey, after the draft, you're probably not going to get drafted, right? Like Captain Obvious. He said after the draft, teams start calling around, even like during the 7th round, they start trying to get their free agents in order and they start trying to figure out who they're going to sign, who are priority free agents, who are guys that are expected to be camp bodies. And he's like, you're definitely going to be a camp body. We got to find you a good spot. So the draft comes and goes. It's 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours after the draft. Now it's like 9:00 at night. And he's just like, hey man, I'm sorry. So I got with my buddies. I'm living in LA at the time after, living at UCLA, go out and stay out way too late and get very frustratingly drunk and wake up in the morning, 6:00 in the morning, my phone ringing. And it's the receivers coach from Tennessee. He's like, hey, Drew Bennett, this is Steve Walters. Do you want to come out? I'm like, yeah. So naive, right? Have no idea what I'm getting myself into. So I literally get in my car in Los Angeles and drive all the way to Nashville. I'm like, hey, I'm going to need a car out there. I'm a Tennessee Titan. This is awesome. So I walk into we're doing a rookie mini camp. So the week after the draft, there's a rookie mini camp. It's only the rookies. I walk into the receiver meeting room, and on the dry erase board is X and Z, and there's 6 names below each X and Z, 12 total. And then there's a line, and then my name is below the line. And I'm like, Coach Walters, what's that? He goes, well, that's the depth chart. And I go, well, why am I below the line? And he says, well, we're trying to sign a cornerback for this camp, for like the camp I'm at. Mm-hmm. And if we get him to get in here, we're going to cut you.
Oh, wow.
Well, Coach, I drove out here. You got to get me, I got to get sweaty once. I got to get a pair of shorts or something. Like, you can't send me all the way back. So that's where I started, right? It was that low. And my agent did tell me, he's like, look, if they ask you if you can do something, you just say yes. I don't care if you've never done it. So when they asked me if I could return punts, of course. Can you return kickoffs? Yeah. Can you play kickoff return? Of course. Like all that stuff. So
Definitely.
It was basically just trying to keep your head down, do as much as you can do, learn the plays. That was a big thing, right? If you only get 2 plays in team, your first few, you better make sure you're running the right, route, all those little things, and then catch the ball and those types of things. So, I mean, it really, people always say luck is opportunity meeting preparation and all that stuff, but there is a lot of luck involved with, my story and a lot of free agent stories. I had, Kevin Dyson, Derek Mason, Chris Sanders, Justin McCarron, Eddie Berlin, a guy named Chris Coleman that was there that was, an established veteran. All those guys were obviously way ahead of me. So I had to fight through all the other undrafted free agent guys. And then it just worked out that there were a few injuries for our scrimmage in camp against the Indianapolis Colts. So I caught 2 touchdowns in that scrimmage, and they said, oh, okay, we're going to give you the 4th quarter of the first preseason game. And there was a quarterback named Chris Sanders that was from University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, who actually lives in Frisco, still a buddy of mine. And he was like, hey, man, there's no way I'm going to make the team. So if I'm in there for any reason, I'm going to throw you every ball. So in the first preseason game, he was a quarterback in the 4th quarter, and I had like 7 or 9 catches in 1 quarter of a preseason. He threw me everything.
That's awesome.
Backside runoff plays that I wasn't even supposed to be in the read. I turn around, the ball's in the air. So anyway, that just kind of spiraled, and they said, all right, we're going to give you the 4th quarter, and then, that type of thing. And at the very end, it came down to literally like the last few minutes of the trade deadline, because when the way they do it is, hey, at 5:00 today, if you haven't been cut, you're on the team. And then the Turk comes and taps you on the shoulder all day. They're just picking guys off left and right. You're hoping you're not next. And So it's 5:00. It's like 5:03. And I'm in the locker room. No one said anything. I'm thinking, oh my God, like I actually did it. I made the team. So I walk outside and I call my mom, and my mom goes, "Oh, honey, we're so sorry. We're so proud of you." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Well, we read online that you got cut." And I'm thinking, like, what fringe website did you read that I got cut? And she goes, "Titans Online, like the Titans website said that you got cut." I'm like,
official.
they haven't told me. I got to go. And so
Oh,
Steve Walters walks out right at that time. And I say, "Hey, coach, should I make the team?" He says, "Give me 10." He literally goes inside, goes upstairs and asks. And he says the exact same thing from day one. He walks downstairs and says, "Yes, you're on the team, but you're the first person we're going to cut if we need roster space. So don't go buy a car." And that was the start of my NFL career for the Titans.
Man,
So
that must be nerve-wracking too, because you're almost like walking on eggshells at that point. I mean, anything could happen.
Totally. And that, I feel like that was actually kind of a good edge to have. I had that all the way through my career. I always thought that since I was an undrafted free agent and, for a long time I was rookie minimum, and like I was always replaceable. Right. So that was always, I needed to be healthy. I needed to make I need to have a chip on my shoulder and play a little harder and make bigger play, all that stuff. Like, I think that was something healthy for me that kept me kind of focused on everything.
Definitely. That could go like both ways, depending on the person, how strong a person could be. I mean, that could break down a player, or like on your side, I mean, you excelled, So, well, I'm glad they kept you, man. I'm glad they kept you. That's awesome. Now, what do you remember? Do you by any chance remember who the first person you interacted at player-wise when you got into the locker or anything like that? That's my son. Sorry about that. He's
awesome. Yeah. So, obviously the rookies are the guys you bond with immediately, right? There's a lot of guys that are in the same situation, especially some of the free agent guys, the later round draft picks. You kind of all have the same mindset going into the season and into camp and all that stuff like that. Veteran guys there, that was an era of the Frank Wychecks and Eddie George and Steve McNair and Javon Curse and Samari Roll, like really amazing players and amazing guys. Like, hey, what's going on, buddy? There was no, there was no real, like, even though they were all stars, there was no ego within the locker room, and they were happy to help you, happy to, like, they were all good teammates and good leaders, right? I mean, those guys, Eddie George, obviously his work ethic is well documented in that. Like, to see guys like that are established, that have had success, that make a lot of money, still training the way they do and doing all that stuff, like, it was important to kind of get that as a role model. And then Neil O'Donnell, who was a QB that was the backup to McNair, like, that was kind of my guy. He for whatever reason, he took me under his wing. He called me Slim. And so my rookie year, it really helped that I had a guy that was well respected in the locker room, that kind of had the coach's ear a little bit, like, hey, don't sleep on this guy. He'd call me into 7-on-7 when I shouldn't be in there. He'd be like, hey, come in here, I'm going to come back. And he'd throw me the ball and then be like, all right, get out. So those are kind of the interactions that I remember early that made a little difference.
Well, there you go. I mean, you had the guy in college, you had the guy in the preseason game. I mean, you had it, man. You had it
all those little pieces, right?
Yeah, I mean, things happen like that for a reason. So that's awesome. Now, you had a couple of quarterbacks that, obviously when you had Steve McNair, you had Billy, you even had Vince Young. Can you tell me the difference between their style of play? And I mean, all of them were great, but if you have any stories on all three of them.
Yeah, no. So McNair was just the ultimate football player gamer, right? I've never been in a huddle with someone that exudes more confidence and calming on an offense. Like, it didn't matter the situation. There were so many times, especially in the seasons we were good. I mean, most NFL games come down to the last drive or very close. There's a lot of parity. Every single time we got in the huddle, whether it was the end of a half when we really needed to score, or it was the end of the game and it's a hostile environment, the guy he was always the same person. He'd get in the huddle and be like, all right, you ready, buddy? Let's get, you know what I mean? And just amazing control of everything and understanding, even though he might not have been able to name, like, oh, that's cover one robber or whatever, whatever he saw, he was so far ahead of the game with understanding what they were trying to accomplish and where the holes were and stuff like that. He missed one. I mean, because he just, he was always hurt and then would always play, right? But it was like Christmas time. We were playing the Steelers back when they were in our division, and It was a big, important game. McNair wasn't at practice the entire week, like was just gone. He had some issues with the family and injuries.
That's
back,
what Justin would always say, though. Justin,
like, literally, it didn't see him all week.
Practice. Yeah, never
I'd
practice.
see him Saturday night in the meeting room, and he's got the playbook open, and he's flipping through the pages. This is the night before we play the game. I'm like, Mac, we good? He goes, buddy, it's all the same thing. They just call it something different. And he throws for 275 yards and 2 touchdowns and win the game. It's just, he was amazing, right? Like just one of the most unique players I ever played with, quarterback or not. And then Billy was just an unbelievably accurate arm, right? Like he had a cannon, he had a quick release, he threw an amazing spiral. And I mean, it's a shame that his career played out the way it did as far as opportunity, getting behind Phillip Rivers for all those years, because I mean, the time he got to play, he really shined, right? I mean, the guy was the only quarterback to ever throw for back-to-back 400-yard games in his whatever. And I mean, there wasn't a throw he couldn't make. And obviously not the athlete McNair was, but, really started to figure it out quick, really understood what was happening quick, had a sharp mind so that he could really make a quick decision and then could really sling it and throw a spiral. And then Vince was just Mr. Personality, right? For such a young guy to come in, his leader, like you wanted to follow Vince Young, even though he struggled obviously with the transition from college to pro and had some issues with the criticism after having won his entire life. Like the guy was just a leader. Like people at practice liked him. People were drawn to him. He was incredibly athletic and you knew that he could always make a play. So, they all have some similarities, but a really fun trio of guys to play with.
Yeah, definitely. Like I was watching some of the highlights and stuff, and like I said, you seem to find that rhythm. Some guys have a little bit of trouble of, especially quarterbacks, just getting on the same page and getting that connection. But it seemed like you had it down packed with all 3 of the quarterbacks you played with. Was it more them? Was it more you? The way maybe you understood the playbook, you understood the routes a little bit better, or could have been just both of you guys at the same time?
I just think that, you get to that point, everyone playing in the NFL is pretty skilled at their position, right? So as long as you have enough time to, Billy and I did. So, obviously Steve, I played with him for so long, you do just get in a rhythm. You get so comfortable. He knows where you're going to be. You actually know where to expect the ball when you come out of breaks. You know what he's thinking and where to, those types of things. Like that's just repetition. And, and years of just, going over running routes together, practice 7-on-7 games, preseason, all that stuff. You just get super comfortable. I mean, I've told some people that, like in the no cadence, when it's really, really loud at other stadiums, I got to a point, I didn't even realize it, but I could tell when McNair was going to snap the ball, not by hearing anything, but just by his body language. So like I would be able, even though you couldn't hear the count, I would know when to go just because you're so used to looking in. Like that's how much time you spend together watching a guy from a certain angle. And, and then Billy, since, Billy and I were close off the field. So we spent a lot of times in the off season, working together, throwing a lot of routes. McNair wasn't always around in the off season. So I spent a lot of hours and a lot of days with Billy. So those things matter. And, there are certain guys that can get a quick mesh and do well together, but it's really the hours and the time spent with those guys that makes a difference.
Definitely. Okay, buddy. Go ahead. Yeah, no, he's very. Is there any of the players that you still talk to this day that you're close to, or that's one thing I always find intriguing, even after playing the game of football for so long. I mean, there's some that you still go to Thanksgiving dinner and still hang out or still talk to. Do you have anyone that you still talk to?
Yeah. From the Titans, I still talk to Billy. Keith Bullock, I see him when I come out to Nashville. Tank Williams lives near me out here now.
Nice.
I'm trying to think, Jacob Bell, who played guard, played with me in St. Louis as well. Like I still talk to him every once in a while. Justin McCarron's, we're more just kind of text here and there, but like we still stay in contact. So there's a little group of guys that, I know what they're doing, stay in contact, especially when I go back to Nashville. I'll see Neil or whoever, when we go back out there. So
definitely. That's good, man. That's really good. We have a couple games I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you. Well, you want to do the The good or the bad first? Which one you want? Which one you want?
I know where we're going. So.
Yeah, I know. It's one of the questions that somebody wanted.
yeah.
I didn't want to ask it, but I mean,
It's part of the career.
Yeah. All right, you want to go with the bad
Yeah,
first?
sure. No, I mean that one still haunts me to this day, right? There's no way to get around that. I saw like every time I see that now, right? I mean, a few years ago was it Alshon Jeffrey dropped one for the the Eagles. I saw Tart, the corner for the safety for the Niners, to drop the pick against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. Like all the people are just like, oh, what? And I'm like, oh no, like that poor guy. Like there is nowhere to hide right now. There's no rock you can crawl under. There's nothing that's going to change the fact that you just blew it. Like that is. So yeah, I mean, the good comes with the bad, right? And man, exactly. I mean, I feel like everyone has a play or two they wish they could take back. And, mine happened to be to go, a good chance to go to the Super Bowl. So it's a little bigger deal than others. But yeah, it's like, I feel like it's all, cheesy as hell, but character building, right? I talked to a lot of kids about success and failure and, being strong enough to all the stuff. And I mean, I've lived it. Like that was not easy. So, yeah, I mean, it's a fun story to tell now, right? 22 wind chill and all that stuff.
How long did it take to actually there was like, okay, I could actually tell this story and stuff like that?
Like 10 years. No.
10 years. Yeah, because I know that the gentleman that asked me, he wanted to know basically what happened in the play. Was it supposed to go to you? Were you anticipating it at all? Let's just go through that moment if you like to.
Yeah, so I mean, funny enough, I probably had like, two of my best catches in my career on the same drive, right? Like I had 2 toe taps on the sideline. One of them I just kind of stuck my hands out thinking there's no way I can reach this ball, and it just stuck in my fingertips. So I was as confident as I could be leading up to that play, right? I wanted the ball. I'm like, this is awesome. Let's go. Keep throwing me the ball. 4th and 12 after I'd caught a receiver screen and gone up, and they called it just absolutely baloney holding call on Benji Olsen.
Yeah.
So instead of a first down, they bring it back, and we don't get any yards. And so it's 4th and 12. It was a 0 blitz, right? They brought everybody, and McNair underthrew it, right? And so I go back. I didn't realize the corner had kind of fallen down. So I thought it was going to be a competitive ball, and it's just a drop. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. Ball hits my palms rather than my fingertips and just pops up in the air, and I get hit. Like there's no like change that I could have done other than just catch the damn ball. Like that's all it is. Catch the damn ball. Looking back now, maybe cradle it rather than try to go up high because I didn't realize the guy had fallen. So yeah,
that's here or there, man. That's just, again, it is what it is, right?
Part of the game. So.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the good. That's enough for the bad. All right. Houston Texans touchdown to win the game. I think it was in 2003. Steve McNair throws a bomb, hits you in the corner, touchdown. How was that moment? How did that feel? How was that play? Go ahead.
I mean, that was probably, there's some playoff wins and things like that. And I caught a touchdown in the AFC Championship against Charles Woodson at home. It was a Raiders game, and I was
I remember that.
But as far as career highlights, I think that was probably number one because that was actually like 4th and 8 or 4th and 10 as well, with whatever 23 seconds left. So it's kind of the one you dream about growing up, right? When you're playing in the backyard, you're like 4th down, 10 seconds left. They're down 5 points. You know what? And sure enough, like it was actually the same thing. It was a blitz that came after McNair, and I just did a little stutter like I was going to do kind of a comeback, and this corner sat, and because people are like, why would that guy let you go behind? With 23 seconds left. But it was, it was a well-designed play, and that was really fun to hear. That's probably my favorite thing in football was when you were at a, away game, couldn't be any louder, right? 4th and 10 to win the game, or, to stop for the home team to win the game. It was in Houston.
Yep.
When you catch that touchdown, the energy and the noise that's sucked out of the stadium is so awesome.
You were telling everyone, I remember that. Yeah, you were telling everyone to be quiet. You were telling everyone
that was a fun day.
Nice. All right, now we have a couple questions. I went over a couple of them and stuff like that. Like I said, it's towards the end. We'll do this. All right, Kelly Bean from Twitter wants to know, what is your favorite memory with the fans? Any special moment stands out?
Well, so I had a crew called the Drew Crew. My brother Richie's got cerebral palsy, so it's kind of something near and dear to my heart. So I had a little posse of kids that were the Drew Crew that was from United Cerebral Palsy of Middle Tennessee.
Okay.
And so like, having them come to the games, doing bowling night on Wednesdays, things like that. I mean, they were hardcore fans. They didn't get a lot of the opportunities that other people did as far as going to the games and tailgating and stuff like that. So like that was a pretty cool experience. But overall, I don't know if it's the same now with Tennessee having grown as much as it has since I've left. But like just the fact that so many people there support the Titans, right? Such a high percentage out here in California. It's probably 1 out of every 30 people like really pays attention to, Raiders when they were here or Niners that are still here now. Out there, it was like, part of the community. It was like, Titans were very popular. Everyone followed the team. So it just felt like very community based outside the facility. And, the things like them lining up when we'd come home from games on big wins and stuff like that outside the gates and things like that. I mean, that was pretty special. So there were a lot of good memories there.
Definitely, man. All right, we got another one, man. This one's from Douglas Brown. Douglas Brown wants to know, why did he wear 19 and then change it to 83?
So having been a no-namer undrafted free agent, they give you the ugly. I mean, talk about an awkward white guy, 6'5", wearing 19. I mean, I was just the worst look on a. So no, all the 80s numbers. It was back then you couldn't have anything but an 80s number if you were a receiver.
Okay.
So obviously they were all full. So 19 was the next option. So they gave me 19, and then the second year. Now I would have kept the nasty number because it was what I started with, and I made the team with it. But the next year, whoever it was, somebody left and the 83 opened up. And back then you had to take the open number if it was
really?
there. So they moved me to 83. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. All right. So the last question, all right, it's Taylor S. wants to know, how has the team supported your career, and what were some of the big decisions or adjustments you had to make in your life in order to excel in your career? It's a pretty big one.
Yeah. That I would say that, there's different, when I went to play for St. Louis, I learned that like the franchises are a lot more different than you would expect, right? There's just certain franchises that I feel like set you up to really feel, act, and enjoy being a professional. And Tennessee did a great job of that, right? The facilities are top notch. Fisher, the way he ran the franchise, was very organized. He knew exactly what to expect. Training staff was great. The schedule was great. Like, they set you up to really excel and be your best and be healthy and all that stuff like that. And that's not the case in all the different places that I went. So I think that the Titans just, the community, the support there, you're motivated to play well when everyone around you is into it and feels, up and down, based on the success of the team. So I think that's it. You can't be successful in that profession and not just completely commit yourself in every angle of your life to football, right? Like, it's funny thinking now, like every night, how much sleep you get, every single thing I ate, if I was going to go on vacation, making sure that I had somewhere to train and lift weights and do all that stuff, like that was all hyper important. And the commitment amount it was endless, right? You never had a day you didn't think about, what am I doing today to make sure that I stay healthy, that I'm fit, that I, am going to be ready for the football season, or during the football season, I'm going to be my best. So that's just kind of the commitment that, and that breeds itself inside the locker room, right? You see other guys, like I said, Eddie and those guys that when I got there kind of saw how the time frame and the amount of time in the facility, outside the facility that they did, going to see specialists and therapists and things like that, all in your free time to make sure you're healthy. Like, all that stuff is part of it. So
that's crazy, though. And especially that amount of, because I talked to one of the, Brian Arakpo, and he was telling me he opened up a facility in Austin just about health and just regaining and just treating your body. I think it's the Chronos, the ones where you put
cryotherapy,
all that. He has a store that he opened up. He's like, man, it would have made such a big difference if we had this back when I played. He's like, and that's one thing that he invested, that he loves, and he thinks that helps for future football players or football players that are happening now. They just get that treatment, because once it's done, man, like, your body goes through. Your guys put your bodies in a lot of situations and bumps and bruises. So I can imagine.
And that stuff's great. Yeah, that's all the cryotherapy and like stem cell stuff. I wish that was all around when I was playing.
Exactly. Drew, what do you do now? What is Drew Bennett doing now? Are you coaching?
living the revised dream, right? That's what I tell people after football. There's only like so much you can, love to do. But no, so I got 2 little girls, 9 and 6, live in California, married. I work at UBS. So I work as a financial advisor and, have quite a few NFL clients. Like I work for a bigger group and I kind of business development, account management stuff, but it's kind of fun to relive those years, right? I have a lot of guys that are in their 20s at different stages in their career, different earning years and those types of things. And to go back and really be able to tell them, hey man, this is where I made a mistake, both, outside of finance, but also with finance. And this is where these are the things I wish somebody had told me. So it kind of makes me, stay into the game a little bit and follow these guys and go to some of the games and relive some of the years that I, went through personally to kind of go back with these guys and relive it again.
What's something recurring that you kind of keep telling, the players and stuff? Is there something like maybe like a lesson that you're like, hey, don't forget to do this, or hey, do this, or anything like that?
What we spoke about, I know a lot of guys that didn't, that the lifestyle of the NFL was a little bit more important than the actual professional side of it. Like there was definitely guys that didn't take their craft as serious as they should have and maybe end up injured or not getting the opportunities they felt like they were that they deserved and things like that. And it's for me, I kind of always like, you have all this time later in life, trust me, I've been out 12 years now or whatever it is. Like you have all this time later in life to do whatever you want, to travel as much, to go stay up late and all that stuff. Like focus on this 8-10 years of your life and really try to extrapolate as much value both personally and financially as you can, which is the same thing I tell the kids when I talk to high school and colleges. It's like, no one's ever looked back 15 years later and been like, man, I wish I, had a better time in college, right? It's no, I wish I had really given everything to this one chance to go play pro football or pro basketball or baseball, whatever. And rather than like, oh man, I should have taken it more seriously, right? Like that's the much bigger regret. So that's kind of the message.
All right. Well, like I said, Drew, it's been a amazing time watching you. You left your blood, sweat, and tears on the field. Again, everyone loves your. Like I said, you're one of the fan favorites, man. Everyone loves you, and everyone's always asking. That's why this was kind of cool about the podcast. Everyone's like, "Oh, you got Drew on you. Wonder how he's doing." So, man, everyone loves you in Tennessee. Like I said, you're always got a soft spot in everyone's heart in Nashville, and still, like I said, amazing person and an amazing player, man. And I want to say thank you for coming on and spending a little time with me, even though my kid hasn't stopped talking yet.
Yeah, that was great. No, I appreciate the time, man. It was fun to reminisce. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem, man. God bless and tighten up, man.
Take care.